what do you think this specific trip means for the two countries? Is it going to really bring in a new era?
I think this is a very important visit because the Palestinians think that the relationship with China is of great importance. And we, just before this visit took place, we received the deputy head of the Chinese Council, People's Council, or the parliament. And I think the attention is directed at three things. First of all, that Palestine is part of the process of developing good relations between the Arab countries and China.
Yeah.
And within especially the plans for peaceful economic cooperation and so on. Second, the Palestinians believe that China should have a very important role in any future peace process in resolving the ongoing situation here and in achieving the Palestinian rights for freedom and independence and the end of Israeli occupation.
I see.
We don't believe that the United States or any other country should monopolize the process. And China, as one of the very important superpowers that support the issue of peace, should be a very important player in the international arena.
Okay.
And finally, we believe that very specific economic cooperation between us and China could help develop the future Palestinian state.
Mr. Barghouti certainly have brought up a lot of hopes and expectations come from the Palestinian side, but of course things have to be achieved one by one. Ms. He, here is the issue. China President Xi Jinping pledged unremitting efforts in terms of bringing peace and stability to the Middle East. Of course, the Palestinian issue is a big one. China committed to the Palestinian state, two-state solution. But there are still obstacles, particularly given the latest development in the Middle East and the U.S. policy toward that. So how much role can China maneuver in order to bring parties together?
Well, this visit itself has shows already clearly that Palestinian side and also I think Israeli side also, they have paid a great attention to China's role. They all hope that China will improve our engagement, increase our engagement in that part of the area. But I will not say that China can play bigger role as they all expected. Simply because now we see the President Trump, they visited the Middle East, they meet like both the Palestinian leader Abbas and also like Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. And both of the leaders also paid a visit to the Washington, D.C. before the President Trump made the visit in return. So which has shows that they all also regarded the United States as a very important player. Right. They even welcome United States back to that area, especially this wishes coming from the Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu. He feels so happy.
So what does that mean?
That means, I think United States, even though they are the lip service saying we wish that China come over here, but I think in reality, they still regard that area as their own influence area. So they have some obstacles. This is one point of the things. Another aspect of this things is China. I don't think China now is fully ready by ourselves to fill any so-called vacuum there. So we are the newcomer there, and all of engagement is mostly, I think, is on the economic cooperation.
Right.
Yeah, even though President Xi Jinping has been put forward those 4 points, even as early as 2013 and
right.
2016, he put forward as well. But I don't think we have so much leverage.
So, Mr. Barghouti, what about that? I mean, you heard your Chinese colleagues say, I'm not sure we can do much about that. I'm not sure we are really going to have a decisive role on those issues as well. So what do you think?
I think there are four advantages that China has. First one, China is not neutral in this issue. As was said, yes, China has been in very good friendship with the Palestinian people. Historically, China supported the Palestinian struggle for freedom. And China is a country that has history and knows very well what is the meaning of being under occupation and what is the meaning of struggling to liberate your country or parts of your country from being occupied. Second, I think that China has a much more balanced position than the United States. The United States is absolutely biased to Israel. Third, I think Israel cares a lot about relationship with China. Israel cannot afford to upset China and upset Russia and upset so many other countries. So that gives China definitely a very important and big leverage. But that requires also understanding that this is not a conflict between two equal sides. No, this is a situation of one country occupying the other. Israel is oppressing the Palestinians, occupying them, has created a system of apartheid. And that's why the only way to achieve a true effective political framework for a solution, it has to be an international one.
Yeah, it is an international one. We see that being discussed over and over again. But having said that, though, it has also a lot to do with the economic realities that countries and regions are facing right now. Mr. Zhang, here comes the issue. The Palestinian side, so far over the past few years, have not done very well when it comes to economic growth. So under the current circumstances, it's not like it's going to change overnight either. So at this point, what can China and Palestine do together?
The critical issue is how to promote development. In this regard, this time I noticed that President Abbas already expressed their willing to cooperate with Chinese side on the platform of BR, the Belt and Road Initiative. You know that from Chinese side, we also agreed to cooperate with Palestinian side on in the field of infrastructure and improve the capacity of local people. Meanwhile, we also will promote industrial park establishment in Palestine. Also, we can promote trade and investment.
But here is the issue, Mr. Zhang. There is a lack of stability when you talk about the situation in Palestine. And also when you talk about infrastructure building, sometimes it goes to issues related to the territories and related to the entitlement. So how is China likely to solve those problems? Can China really work with both sides to figure out the solution, which other country has never did over the years? Is there much political obstacle for China to achieve this economic cooperation?
Yeah, so the very critical barrier that is the problems between Palestine and Israel. So I think that, for example, if we want to to have new infrastructure, that means that we can play a role as a coordinator between Israel and Palestine. Also, this time from Chinese side, we suggest we can set up a trilateral cooperation mechanism. Wow,
that's a lot of work, Mr. Barghouti, as you could hear from your Chinese colleagues' suggestions. The question is, will, for example, the Israeli and Palestinian side be able to look at the economic opportunity and say, well, this is a common ground, probably we could strike together and we can sit down with the Chinese or whoever that is building infrastructure there and change the picture one by one. Mr. Barghouti, do you think the Palestinians are willing to do that?
Regarding the economic development, we are not underdeveloped. The problem we have is that we have an obstructed development because of occupation. The Israeli occupation prevents us from using our natural resources. We don't have control over our borders, over our import.
Okay, I got your point. I understand the reasoning.
The key to economic development is that Palestine should be independent so that there will be cooperation with two independent states.
Okay.
You can't have Israel as independent state and Palestine as an occupied territory and expect equal relations. That doesn't work.
So, Mr. Barghouti, what are you suggesting here? Are you suggesting preconditions for any kinds of economic cooperation between you and the Palestinian side, and the Israeli side, or and any third party, for example, China or some of the other regional powers? So, are you saying if we don't figure out the two-state solutions first, we're not going to do anything else? Is that what you're saying, Mr. Barghouti?
No, not at all.
And then what exactly you mean?
No. Let me say what I'm saying. You are already having a lot of economic cooperation with Israel independently from Palestine. A lot of trade deals, even military deals. You can have independent relations with Palestine. One thing that China can do, for instance, being the country that has the largest solar electricity in the world, You can help us create our solar energy, for instance, in the occupied Palestinian territory, and this would be part of building a Palestinian independent state.
Okay.
There is no limit to how far we can cooperate. Already Palestinian companies cooperate a lot with China.
Wonderful.
And we should encourage that. But we should always remember that economic development cannot substitute for freedom from occupation.
The Palestinian side, of course, working on what they consider as the most important issue, which is the territory issue and the two-state solution. But you do see there are, let's just be frank here, enormous amount of difficulties to achieve that overnight. So here comes China. China, the traditional belief to help developing countries and to have fairness in the international system. But also China is very fair in terms of developing all kinds of trade and economic ties with all parties. And also China has this big responsibility politically as a member of the Security Council permanent members, 5. So this very complicated roles combined, what does that mean for China's option for economic and trade cooperation with the Palestinian side?
I agree with the idea put forward by our Palestinian friend. Yes, you cannot separate like political issue and the economic issue. So when you're talking about like independence, two-state solution, of course, from the Palestinian perspective, they think it's unequal when those three sitting together because they are not so independent. So we understand that fully. But without this, you cannot say wait something finished and then you follow with another one. So those political issue and economic issue have to be pushed forward simultaneously because no time to wait. You cannot wait because that political like issue, you cannot say how many years, how many people are suffering.
All right. Mr. Barghouti, I want you to just finally respond to this. I know you have other meetings to go to, but you know, on this, when you think about Palestine's future, when you think about Palestine's cooperation, not just with China, with any other country, are there some soul-searching and talks that the Palestinians are having with others around the world? Those are most important thing, I think, at this point.
I think the Palestinian side, and that was explained very clearly to the Chinese leadership, have done so many compromises, accepting a little tiny state in West Bank and Gaza, which is only 22% of the historic Palestine, less than half of what the United Nations decided we should have, is a big compromise. We've been in peaceful negotiations for 26 years. It is the Israeli government that destroyed Oslo Agreement. It is the Israeli government that took now a decision that Jerusalem is not for negotiations. It is necessary that the world community abides by international law. And international law says settlements are illegal. And Israeli occupation is illegal. That's why I think we are ready for compromise. We've been so pragmatic. But we are weaker than the Israelis. And what we need is the balance. And the balance can happen if the international community supports the simple thing of implementation of international law.
Okay.
In which case, we and the Israelis could have not only peace, but also very good cooperation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mustafa Barghouti. Thank you for coming over to our show. I want to continue our discussion about that point, Mr. Zhang, about the economic cooperation possibilities with the Palestinian side. Yeah. Earlier, you heard once again the insistence on the political possibilities first, before others, before any other talks about business deals or cooperation. But Mr. Zhang, if China wants to play a role, China has to make sure there is going to be security for the projects it's committed to. Yeah. And it has to be natural investment. It's not just going to be, you know, one country's welfare to the other country, because it's this business that we're talking about here.
Yeah. Actually, I think that from Chinese side, our point is that Israel and Palestine should follow the UN Council decision and regarding their political solutions and territorial issues. And on this basis, I think that gradually Palestine need to consider how to make their development. In this regard, I think that China's experiences could be considered by Palestine. For example, you have to be more open. You need to accept some of foreign investors in order to promote infrastructure improvement as well as industrialization. Just like 40 years ago happened in China. At that time, China also was very poor. Now, I think that China's investors can play a role in Palestine. Meanwhile, over there, we can set up, industrial park, concentrated some of, not only China's investors, but also from other countries' investors. Don't forget that nowadays in Palestine, only 5,000, companies.
Oh yeah, I think first of all, the Palestinian side should unite it. This is the things we have been constantly saying, because now we have seen very clearly Gaza Strip, and there is another. So there are Fatah and Hamas. So they haven't reached consensus among themselves. This is their homework. They should handle it by themselves. And then talking about this trilateral cooperation mechanism, this is the idea I think the Chinese government now has been put forward. So we want to serving as the bridge role. So bring those two parties together. So this idea I think is wonderful, because with this mechanism, we can talk both political issue and economic issue, since those two cannot be separated. So once we have doing those even trilateral economic cooperation projects, if everybody be the shareholder, there's no reason to bomb them through any kind of way of those war, because if you bomb them, you're bombing yourselves project. So with those economic bonds getting closer and closer, maybe that will naturally bring those political, those disputes, also bring them together, closer at least.